To say that everything is either super good or not is completely and totally ridiculous. And yet that's where we are.
Wow.
What's up, everybody? So my name is Michael Stephenson. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is currently what you're watching, my entertainment industry series, in which I go through some of the things in the entertainment industry that I think are problems that not just myself, but a lot of people are seeing and experiencing. It's more than just the "it's not the way it used to be" type of thing. These are legitimate problems that even people within the industry have been calling out as of late. I also, if you are here for the first time, let me just run through my spiel. I am trying to do these videos in sequential order, so please, I would implore you to go back and watch some of the first videos, because I am trying to build up a particular vocabulary, a shorthand, so that some of these videos can be shorter as we go along. With that said, I want to talk about something that is sort of personal, but it's really just more about my work, my own writing. So later this year, it's currently 2023, I am going to be releasing another novel sometime in the late fall, maybe even winter. So November, December, hopefully, fingers crossed that I am able to release it at around that time. I'm going to be releasing a absurdist comedy novel. The title is FML, Farce Millennial Lessons. One of the things that I'm going to be, basically, it's like a generational novel, I guess you could say. In the same way that, and my novel is not going to be in the same realm, but in the same way that the novel Forrest Gump, which then later became a movie, Forrest Gump, in the same way in which that novel covered the experience of the baby boomer. It kind of summed up everything that the baby boomers were going through. Farce Millennial Lessons sort of kind of wants to do that same thing, where we look at how society adheres to millennials as it stands right now. So anyways, within that novel, came up with this idea. One of the things that is not a dominant force, but it is mentioned in the novel, is called this idea. You know, it's night currently, so I can't speak super loud, and I definitely can't yell, but basically it's the scream of AH, and that is actually abbreviated. It stands for all is hype. That basically everything, all we see is hype. It's nothing but hyped up, overly sensationalized, overly exuberant, overly zealous stuff that we are currently seeing. And so that is the reason for this video, is that yes, the novel is an absurdist comedy, but it definitely is looking at our society as it currently is, picking it apart, dissecting it with some real, true observations and analyses. I wanted to talk about this, especially as it goes, or as it concerns the art and entertainment field, as we've been talking about with film and television, because when you look at it, it has, as of late, and like I said, I think that we are in the Avatar era. As of late, it has felt as if all is in fact hot, and it does constantly make me want to scream my lungs out, because it is almost a scary kind of bad to it, so to speak. To start this, I guess I want to mention something that I might have mentioned already, and I'll definitely probably mention again, especially when we get to talking even in more depth about criticism and about the pros and cons of modern day film and television criticism, both from professional side as well as from you guys, the consumer side. Having my consumer hat on right now, as well as having my business hat on right now, I wanted to mention this article because it felt as if it blurs both of those lines, and it sort of speaks to this idea of all is hype. So I was reading this article, I want to say maybe a year and a half ago, and I can't remember what platform it was on. I don't know if I screenshotted it. If I did, and I was able to find a screenshot in the pile of like 1,000 screenshots that I've taken, you'll probably be seeing it on the screen right now. But if I haven't, then I apologize for forgetting it, especially to the writer. The article basically asked a very simple but very complex and really kind of depressing question. It simply asked, does anybody know what a good movie is anymore? Within the article, the writer went went through this idea of specifically professional criticism, but also some consumer criticism as well. And the basis, his or her basis was that, or their basis was that the way in which we are grading or critiquing films these days is so different than the way in which we used to do it that it doesn't even seem like the two sort of rubrics, the modern day rubric and whatever rubric was used in older 20, 30, 40 years ago, it doesn't even seem like they exist within the same realm. This writer was basically making the argument that the old systems of whether it's thumbs up or how many stars, or I use a grade system like in school, A, B, C, D, F, any of those systems were not in any way, shape, or form conducive to good film or television critique these days. It was a fairly short article, so I don't think they really could go into depth on as to why those things were so inaccurate these days. But one of the things that they did point out is that they felt that the aggregate site that we all know of as Rotten Tomatoes, and mind you, I don't use Rotten Tomatoes in the sense that I use it to like judge films or anything, but I do check Rotten Tomatoes after I've seen a film, but I also check Metacritic as well as IMDb. So I check all three. Rotten Tomatoes specifically has come under a lot of harsh criticism itself for being an aggregate website. They've come under fire for turning the opinions that are contributed to the site by the many different critics into a percentage number so that we can judge on how good this movie is supposed to be. So they'll spit out some percentage of like, 90% of all the professional critics think that this movie is good. And then 90% of the audience thinks that this movie is bad or whatever. And a lot of people have, especially in the age of Marvel, and I don't really attribute this to Marvel. A lot of other people do, but a lot of people have looked at Rotten Tomatoes and thought that, well, this is a bad thing because the way in which they're grading these movies, so to speak, is not taking into account like a lot of other things. What those things are exactly, most people who are against Rotten Tomatoes have not really been able to nail down or say specifically. And I think that was one of the main points that they were trying to make, but it was hard for me to really fully get behind the article except for that one specific idea. The critic themselves, they were struggling to figure out whether anybody knows what a good movie is anymore. With us being in the Avatar era, I would say that the answer is a definitive no, but not a hard no. A definitive no, because it definitely doesn't seem like we know what a good movie is. We know what a popular movie is, and we even know what a high grossing movie is, of course, right? But we definitely don't seem to know what a good movie is, and we also don't seem to know what a classic movie is, mainly because if I'm looking at it, there's so much stuff on the internet right now that is calling movies that aren't classics, and we know that they're not classics. We know that they probably aren't going to ever become classics. They're calling them classics. So going back to it, all is hype. All is hype. So let's start from there. First off, what is hype? For those of you who don't know, well, they say the dictionary definition of it pretty much aligns very well with like the street or connotational definition of it. And basically it is that something is being overly advertised or marketed to you in some aspect, okay? It's being hyped up. Athletes, when they're about to go do something big, when they're about to play in the big game, etc., they get hyped up. They'll play music or what have you, listen to motivational speeches, they get hyped up, right? In the industry, when we're talking about hyping things up, what we're usually talking about is that we're talking about taking a project and not only marketing it incredibly well so that people know about it, but marketing it in a way that people believe that project is going to be good or going to be great or exceed even those expectations. From a pure business side / marketing standpoint, this is actually a really good thing. Hyping up your movie is the thing that you want to do if you are in the actual movie business. Me, myself, I'm going to try to always hype up my own books, my own novels, my own writings, etc., etc. That's a good thing from their standpoint. They're doing their job and they're doing it fairly well. The problem, though, sets in when the hype that you have created doesn't match the quality of the product that you are hyping. And I think that therein lies the problem. Some of the products that are coming out of Hollywood are so not that good, or they're so bland, they're so mediocre that it is incredibly difficult to say that that, yeah, this lived up not even to personal expectations, but that it lived up to the expectations set, period, by just the marketing alone. And so when you get to that level, I think what happens is that it starts to feel like pretty much everything related to a particular project is hype. None of it is actually true. None of the things that happen within the actual product will live up to the things that they said, the things that they have promised. They are overselling and over-promising on some of these things. That's not a good thing. That is a terrible, terrible thing. When so much of it becomes hype, when a project is no longer living up to the expectations that have been set by the marketing, what I believe a lot of us consumers start to feel like is that the majority of the time, the money, and the effort is being spent not on actually creating the project, but on marketing the project. Even worse, the project is the marketing itself. It's like the project, for lack of a better phrase, the project comes second. It is secondary to the marketing because the marketing is what is going to draw you in. It starts to build up a certain high level of skepticism. And I think that that's sort of where we are now. You go down through like the scroll of Rotten Tomatoes, and I think only just in like the most recent of years, I'm saying post-pandemic, let me be very clear, we are not in a new era yet, at least when it comes to filmmaking and whether or not films and television are going to be good or better again. By no means are we in a new era just yet, but they have sort of started to scroll this back a little bit, at least from what I've seen. But when you look and you scroll through Rotten Tomatoes, there is this sort of stratification, because one of the things that hype does is that it sort of stratifies not only the projects themselves, but the people around those projects. When you as a consumer are told that something is going to be good, that something is going to be great, that something is going to be amazing, that it's like this almost perfect thing, and then you go into it and it isn't that, like say it's a mediocre movie, okay? For instance, Dune is a slightly less than mediocre movie, and I've talked about how much I dislike Dune on the channel before. I think that in and of itself helps to foster a more toxic fan base, or on the reverse, it helps to foster a fan base that is less connected with the films and the TV shows that they are consuming. My example, as I started, is Dune. Dune is a slightly less than mediocre film. If I was judging it on my usual criteria, and this is still my rubric or my judging scale that I use for TV shows and for films, it would get somewhere around a C-. So, that's barely a passing grade. Of course, D and F are fail, at least here in the American system of schooling, although we are going to be changing our schooling system quite drastically, and we've sort of already started that. Whole nother video for another day. Anyways, it is, like I said, slightly less than mediocre, but I talk about it as if it is a bad film. It's not necessarily a bad film. There are many bad parts to it. There are a few good parts to it, but I am judging it not just on it being either a good, bad, or mediocre film. My judgments are also coming through the lens or the filter of having heard things about the movie, and basically having heard hype about the movie. The movie was overhyped as it was coming out. So when you hear things about how, this is a brilliant film, visuals are amazing, this is from Oscar nominee Denis Villeneuve, all of these wonderful things. And then, of course, months later, after the movie is out, it does get nominated for more Oscars, and it wins a couple of those, albeit technical Oscars, and it gets nominated for a writing Oscar, which was a complete and utter travesty. And if I'm being honest with you, it was an affront to not only writing, but especially to good writing, if you ask me. Those sorts of things that help to hype a movie up and say that, see, this is actually a really good movie, this is a great movie, this is an amazing movie. While yes, there is a certain part of a fan base that comes out and will agree with it, like, oh, this is a fantastic movie, they're right. There's another part of a fan base to where if it doesn't hit on those claims, then they have a stronger affinity toward hating it, not just being indifferent toward it or saying like, oh, it didn't really live up to what it was supposed to. Like, no. Their emotions may get the best of them, and they will go and say, oh, you know what? No, this movie was bad and I dislike it. It's a travesty and it's all these things. The reason for that is not necessarily because they just want to hate on the movie. Yes, there are people out there who do just want to hate on something, and I'm not one of those people. I'm not someone who just wants to hate on Dune for the sake of hating on it, nor am I a contrarian who just wants to hate on it because everybody seems to love it or something like that. Same with Avatar. Like I explained in my Avatar video, and like what was talked about last year, I couldn't figure out why I didn't like Avatar in the same way that I guess everybody else liked it. So I'm not a contrarian. I'm not someone who hates just to hate. What it is, I think, and how this develops is that this sort of goes back to the generational cycle, as I've talked about in previous videos, as it pertains to truth, reality, and beauty. The majority of people don't want to feel as if they've been lied to. And when you say that something is this basically as great as like the second coming of Jesus or somebody, insert your own religion, or if you don't have religion, it's like the curing of all cancers and all STIs or STDs. It's something amazing. And then it doesn't even halfway live up to that. I think that a lot of people these days, especially since people are far more sensitive and far more in touch with their emotions, with their stronger emotions, I think that fosters a sense of, oh my God, I feel lied to. I feel cheated in some way. This doesn't feel like maybe it should feel. And I'm wondering why that is. And then I think people struggle. And again, this is not just one specific generation. This is all the generations. Because as I said, we are currently in the era of phony, right? So that's for Gen Zers. They're the ones who are dominating the way in which we think about things. The moment you feel cheated or lied to, that engenders a lot of really strong emotions, because people hate feeling as if they have been cheated on or cheated out of something or lied to about something that maybe and honestly, it doesn't even matter, because I was going to say that they care about, but it actually doesn't even matter these days whether or not they care deeply about a thing going into it or not. They just don't want to be lied to at all anyway. When it comes to critiquing of these different films and television, there's almost never a mediocre movie anymore. Go on Rotten Tomatoes and like most of the big budget films, and like I said, they have been better at doing this in like the last few years since the pandemic sort of ended in like 2021. They've been a little better at saying that some things are mediocre, but you will see more films that are over like the 85 or even 90% threshold, or same for the TV shows over that threshold. You'll see more of those that have just popped up within the last 15 years than probably we had in the last 40 years before that. There are just so many of to where it's like, yeah, this movie is great. This movie is fantastic. You have movies that are also mediocre, scoring perfect or near perfect scores to where they get like a 99% or 100%. People loving this movie. And it's like, it's no way that this movie is basically perfect. It's just no way. On the flip side, if a movie is bad, it also can't be average either. It can't live in that zone of like, oh, it's somewhere around a 5 or a 4. Like, no. It has to be an F grade. It has to be a 1 or even a 0 or a 2. These things seem to be unable to live in a place in which they are just sort of mediocre. They're not incredibly exceptionally bad, but they're also not incredibly exceptionally good either. They're overhyped in both senses. They're overhyped as being really good, or they're overhyped as being really bad. And yes, you can say, well, some of those people who are posting 0s or 1-star reviews or whatever, especially for consumers, they're doing that because they hate the politics or what have you of the movie. And we've seen a lot of that as of late. We've definitely seen a lot of that. I'll definitely speak on that eventually, but we've seen way too much of it. And it's just like, that's, I get, but at the same time, can it all be that? I don't know. Maybe, yes. But even then, just the fact that someone will spend that much amount of time trying to do that to one specific movie lets you know just how much emotion and feeling that they've invested into hating something. We seem to invest energy in things that are incredibly polarizing. So then on top of that, there are basically layers to this thing. It seems as if it has played into this idea of the secret or mantras or just repetitive memory or something, like some sort of brain washing almost, it feels like. What happens, and this is the exact thing that happened with the show which shall not be named. Again, that show got barely over 500,000 viewers in a country that has over 300 million people in it. When you look at that, it was like the network that created that show, they came out and said, yeah, it's a hit. But not only did they say it was a hit, they continue to constantly tell everybody, listen, this is a hit show. This is a really good show. This is an amazing show. This is a fantastic show. This is a show that you should definitely watch. You should definitely see. You have to see the show. Everybody is talking about this show. Everybody is tweeting about this show. People online are just, they are obsessed with this show. People are dressing like the characters on the show. What is your favorite character on the show? Blah, 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 yada, 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 etc. It felt like they're ginning up of all this hype about this show, which again, it's not even written well. It's not an actually good show. It feels like some sort of falsity, some kind of falsehood or some kind of joke or trickery that is being played on us as an audience. until we eventually give in. It's basically like back when you remember when, like, you guys remember when you were little kids and maybe you had a sibling or a cousin or like a best friend or something who, if you went on, maybe you went over their house or you went on a long trip with them, and so you had to sit next to them, and they would just start some sort of annoying song or just some kind of annoying habit, whatever, the I'm not touching you thing, when they have a finger super close to you, why are you hitting yourself, and they'll make you hit yourself, whatever it was. They would do something super annoying that was supposed to get you aggravated. The marketing kind of honestly feels like that, to where it's like, you're constantly telling me how great this thing is until eventually I just give in and say, all right, I guess it is great. Let me go and watch it too. Once you get to the actual product, you realize, wow, this actually isn't that good. And yet somehow, because they keep saying, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is great, you seem to like, well, maybe I should stick around, or you start to doubt yourself, or you either doubt yourself and say, well, maybe it is good, and you try to change your own thoughts and feelings about it, or as I said, you realize like, wow, I've been lied to, I've been bamboozled, and the people who did this, they need to pay simply for lying to you. But of course, you know that you can't really rage against them, so you just have to rage against the product. I think that that's sort of where we are. All is hype. The stars and celebrities that we have, they are hyped up to a certain point, but again, the way in which Hollywood does it is different, because you can tell that they're hyping them up not because they actually believe in them, but they're hyping them up just so that they can make a few quick dollars on them before they throw them away, probably in like 7 years. So they don't really become stars. The TV shows and the films, they're overhyped. The show is like canceled within 2 or 3 seasons, and you're just sitting there thinking to yourself like, wait a minute, wasn't this a hit show? You definitely heard that it was a hit show, and yet somehow it just disappears all of a sudden. Circling back to the article that I started with, when you're constantly being told that everything is the #1 hit new thing, it's, a show is the #1 hit new show, a new movie that just came out is the #1 worldwide grossing top movie of this week or whatever, or it's a comedy movie, it's the #1 comedy in the world, etc., etc. You're being told that all of these things are great. They're fantastic. This movie, it doesn't have a plot, doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, but it's a fantastic movie anyway somehow. Yeah, it has flaws, but we're going to give it 100% on Rotten Tomatoes because every single critic loved this movie. And yeah, they know that it has flaws, but they're willing to look past them and they don't care about the flaws. When you're being told that constantly, I think it makes it much more difficult to actually figure out what is and what isn't a good or a great or even just a decent movie anymore. The hype engenders one of 2 reactions. Well, I guess it engenders a third reaction too. The third reaction being complete and total submission. And you say, yeah, this is a good movie. Or it engenders doubt in yourself. Like, maybe I'm not seeing something that everyone else around me is seeing. And you don't want to miss out on whatever it is that they're seeing because, maybe what they're seeing is so obvious or something like that. Or the third thing, which is it engenders this fear almost that you are being lied to and you're being misguided and misdirected in some way. And that is not a good feeling to have. Almost everything has been hyped so much these days. Film, TV, books, music, definitely, where it's like, this is great, this is fantastic. I have taken to almost judging things on whether or not I think that thing can become a classic or not. And if it can't become a classic, then I have to automatically bump it down from, I definitely have to bump it down from an A. So it can only reach like a B level for me as far as the grades go. And I'm just not seeing hardly any classics these days, hardly any. I want to show maybe to my kids one day or to another generation or whatever. Everything else just seems like it's hype. And the biggest problem with everything being hyped is that eventually when the people who are hyping up those things are either no longer here or they have moved on to something else, chances are high that for posterity's sake, those things can be and will be easily forgotten because the house, the fandom, all of the goodwill that they built up when they were live, when they were on, when they were in their era and they were being made and all that stuff, all of that is built on sand. It's built on crumbling, shaky ground that won't last for any period of time. And frankly, I think that that's a huge problem in Hollywood right now. All is hype. Hey everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks and Pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.